In time and call the honourable member for Herbert.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Environment, Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Amendment Bill of 2015. And in doing so, I pose the question, if you lived in Townsville and you're going to put a fence around your pool, or you're going to change your fence around your property, should someone in Melbourne who has had something to do with a fence at some stage in his life or her life, should they be able to object to you putting that fence around your house? Should they be able to object to that and you have to go and defend that action in court? Or put it vice versa, should someone in Townsville be able to object to someone in Melbourne doing something on their house? Because at some stage or other, we've had something to do with the fence or the pool or anything like that. So it is the way the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Bill has been worded. If you have had anything to do with the environment, you can lodge an objection on any grounds whatsoever, and it must be discussed and it must be ruled upon, no matter where it is. So you could be in Adelaide and you could sit there and object to a mine in North Queensland going ahead on anything just purely because you've had something to do with it. That's what's wrong with this. And I said the member for Melbourne was just in here. I noticed he didn't get here by horse and cart. He flew here on those stinking great big fossil fuel burning jets. He got here this morning in a fossil fuel burning car. So he's happy to use everything. He comes from Melbourne, which gets most of its fossil fuel, most of its electricity from those brown coal generators in the Latrobe Valley. He's happy to receive all that. He's happy that his industries can go on with that. But if someone in North Queensland wants to get their lives ahead, if we want to drive North Queensland and Northern Australia, damn them. Damn them to hell, says the member from Melbourne, and you should not have the same opportunity as the rest of Australia. You should not be able to use your resources as you see fit because you know what you're doing. The Great Barrier Reef has been used as a working reef since time immemorial. Since the dawn of Aboriginal and Islander Australia, the Great Barrier Reef has been used as a working reef. Again and again in this argument and on this debate of the environment, and so everything we do impacts on our environment. It is how we manage. It is how we manage those impacts, which is important. Now, the environmental constraints we have around the operations of ports and mines have grown substantially since the mid-1800s, and if you look at how they first started digging gold around Ballarat and Bendigo and Bathurst and those sorts of places in the 1800s, it's a lot different to what we do now. Abbott Point, for instance, has over 300 terms and conditions around which it can operate already inscribed. We've had the Australian Institute of Marine Science, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, all the environmental groups go around those things, and still they complained. 300 terms and conditions, numerous reviews and all that sort of thing. And don't forget that at one stage the Anna Bligh government was going to have coal ports from Princess Charlotte Bay all the way down to Brisbane. And what we did was we concentrated it all on Abbott Point. We made sure that it was world-class in what we do. So it's about how we manage the impacts. That's what's important. Now, when we put these things up, of course, the Green vote and all that sort of stuff, they eventually complained about the destruction of the wetlands adjacent to the port near Bowen. What they didn't realise, and they still had to rule on, was that these wetlands were actually man-made. They weren't mangroves, they were actually man-made. And when we talk about lifting people out of poverty, when I talk about the Carmichael mine, I talk about renewable energy in North Queensland, it's a serious conversation. But the Carmichael mine that is going ahead here and has to go ahead for the sake of North Queensland, it's not about the biggest coal mine in Australia. It is not about the amount of stuff that's going through the Great Barrier Reef. It's not about the lifting of hundreds of millions of Indians out of poverty and giving them the kind of future that they should have. For me, the Carmichael mine and the Northern Galilee Basin is all about small business in Townsville. From the stevedore at the port in Townsville, all the way out to the technicians which will survey the road, who will build the road, fix the bridges, who will drive the pie vans to the men who are working, all the way back in with the rail to Abbott Point. All those things that will go in there, the construction that goes in there, all those small businesses that profit in that area, they are what this is about. They are what this is about. Now, what we will be doing when this goes ahead is looking at how we generate power in Northern Australia. And if the member for Melbourne was still here, he'd be happy to hear about what we're trying to do here. If we can underpin what we do with baseload power, because what we're seeing at the moment, if I could just backtrack one little bit, in Queensland, we are the only really decentralised state in the country. Townsville is 700 kilometres, 800 kilometres north of where the power is generated. For industry to develop in North Queensland, they must pay the transmission costs of that energy, including all the power that is lost during transmission. They must pay for that. So when I have Queensland Nickel in my electorate, and I have Sun Metals, the zinc refinery, in my electorate. Sun Metals is actually the second biggest user of electricity in the state. Second biggest user of electricity in the state, and yet because they have to pay for the transmission costs and the loss of transmission, that they are paying an extra $20 to $30 million a year to operate in Townsville. What is their option? Shut up shop. They were given a gift. They were given a deal by Premier Peter Beattie and by the then Premier Wayne Goss when they signed this thing, that they would have that cheap power, that they would have the power same as equivalent to what they would have in Gladstone and what they would have in Brisbane. On top of that, when it comes to where the pricing point goes, it's an artificial point somewhere near Pine Rivers in Brisbane. So that's where the point is, and it's an arbitrary point. So we are not competitive when it comes to providing power and energy into heavy industry in Northern Australia. Now, we should be value-adding our processing here. We should be able to process minerals, and we should be able to export refined products and value-add. That's what we should do. Recently in Townsville, we've had an energy round table. We've got an energy white paper that's out by the government at the moment talking about how we do these things. Now, the question I pose to my local industry groups, including Townsville Enterprise, is Ewan Jones would really love to see a great big coal-fired power station right in the middle of the state development area in Townsville. Why shouldn't he? Why shouldn't he? So we got together all the people involved in these things, and what we came up with is the energy needs of Northern Australia, and North Queensland in particular, whilst underpinned by a baseload coal-fired power station somewhere in the Galilee Basin, will represent a mosaic of power supplies. We have the ability through Tully Millstream, if we can ever get that thing operating, to provide hydroelectricity. Same with the Burdekin Dam and Hells Gate. We can provide hydroelectricity through there. Still west of there we have the Kennedy Wind Farm and the large solar projects which can go in that space. So we can work and we can provide the whole nation's renewable energy targets through those sorts of things. And what the federal government can do is, if we can get those things up, and if we can use this $5 billion of concessional loan facilities to provide the framework and the high-powered wires and everything to put these things together, we can establish an energy forum, an energy area in North Queensland which will be very attractive to heavy industry. And if you build that framework there, then that is what people will come and see. That is what will be attractive to investors, and that will be what is attractive to industry. And at the moment we can't progress that because we are so uncompetitive with the cost of energy. And into that goes renewable energy certificates and the renewable energy target. Now, if we do this right, we can fix this up. We can develop the north of Australia, we can be an attractive destination for investment in industry, and we can provide the nation's renewable energy targets, and we can provide them well into this century, past 2050, and export that energy and export that technology and export that intellectual property into our region and around the world. That's what we can do. But unless it has baseload power at its base, unless it is underpinned by baseload power, it doesn't come off. So whilst I appreciate that the member from Melbourne was in here before and he is speaking to his constituency in Melbourne, which uses brown coal burned in the Latrobe Valley, principally for their electricity, and their energy. Where I come from, I'm talking about big wind, big solar, hydro. I'm talking about renewable energy in the form of the North Queensland bioenergy establishment at Ingham, which will feed into those things. I'm talking about the MBD algae project at James Cook University, which can be used to produce basically zero emissions, baseload power, and we can export that technology around the world. That's what we have to do. But what we have to do, more than anything, is we have to be able to get to the stage where we can build stuff. And if we have to continually turn around, if we have to continually appease to some fellow who's got rich on the internet and has a philosophical bent on this and doesn't care how much it costs him, then we have to be able to do something on that to protect North Queensland and Northern Australia. Because these people are out to kill us. These people are out to make sure that North Queensland it remains an energy backwater. These people are out there to make sure that we cannot develop our resources. We cannot develop our industry. We cannot become an alternative destination for investment. We cannot do anything in this space if we continually let single issue people make ridiculous claims against projects which have the future of our nation at its base. Now, the member for Melbourne is going to stand there and tell me that Barack Obama's been able to, he's berated us in relation to the Great Barrier Reef, but Barack Obama has been able to lower his nation's electricity, his nation's carbon footprint by fracking. So I don't see Alan Jones jumping up and down about that, and I don't see the member for Melbourne coming up and down, jumping up and down about that. He almost climbed over 3 people to get and touch the man when he was here. So when people like the member for Melbourne and people who don't go there and don't understand what we're trying to do on the ground, it really gets under my skin. And it gets under the skin of people trying to do the right thing in North Queensland. We are not economic vandals. People in North Queensland are not economic vandals. We are highly sensitive to our region and our environment. We understand above everything else that no matter what we do, it has an impact on our environment. It does have an impact on our environment, but it's how we manage those impacts, and that's what we've had to do all the way through, because we have state governments and federal governments which have pushed North Queensland and Northern Australia to the back blocks because you cannot supply energy at a reasonable cost in those areas to develop industry. If we can do that, we can then develop the north of Australia properly, and that's what this is about. So this is not about what the member for Melbourne wants. This is not about what India wants. This is about the small businesses in Townsville. This is about how we build my city of Townsville. This is about how we end up with a waterfront area in Townsville. This is how we redevelop our CBD area. This is about how we improve our schools. This is about how we get more people to teach in North Queensland. This is about how we remove the tyranny of distance for remote education and for people who live in our region. Some of the most socially isolated people in Australia are in these regions. And if you can get anything in this thing, nothing happens in the north of Australia without water and without energy. Nothing happens. So unless we are prepared to work in that space, unless we are prepared to make these things here, and we can provide a response to the world that says not only can you provide coal to hundreds of millions of Indians trying to drag themselves out of poverty, but you can provide it at a costly basis and a safe transport method. Because what happens if they don't get it out of Australia? Do they just dig it up out of Indonesia and use the swamp-based coal there, whose carbon footprint will be 10 times what the thermal coal coming out of North Queensland will be? Are we happy to do that? Are we so ideologically bent in this country that what we want to do is just make sure that we don't care if somebody else supplies the coal? What we want to do is just make sure that Australia goes backwards, and North Queensland in particular. That's what this country seems to be doing through the member for Melbourne, is just trying to make sure that we can't develop what we have here. It's okay for him in the streets of Melbourne. It's okay for him down there, because they are already fully developed. We are on the cusp of something great here. We've finally got a Prime Minister and a Treasurer and a Minister for Trade who believe in the development of Northern Australia. Let's get these people out of the road so that we can actually do something in this space, because this is really, really important, not just to us, but to the entire world. And I thank the House.
I thank the member for